questions. All right. One more presentation of this bracket before we have our lunch break, my friends. So we have a presentation happening now on solar panel disposal with Dr. Deepika Mathur, Research Fellow for the Northern Institute at Charles Darwin University. Can you please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Mathur to the stage?
Oh, this is fine, and that's a forward button, the green one.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
All right. Okay, before I start, I would just like to pay my respects to the Larrakia people on whose land I'm standing and the Aranda from where I come, and pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. All right. So before I start, I want to tell you a little story, which I think you all can resonate with a bit. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. And this is regarding a waste manager in a regional waste management facility. A contractor came up to, for the sake of confidentiality, I'll call that person Margaret, and said, look, I have 800 solar panels, and can I leave it in your landfill? Now, this person had never, ever heard such a request before. So, of course, she was flummoxed. And so she said, okay, let me call the regulators and find out from them. They didn't know what to do either. So they said, look, don't accept. And so the contractor suggested, look, how about you use them as shade structures? And so that was an option. She thought that, you know, reusing anything is a good option. But there was some information somewhere saying that solar panels have toxic materials in them. So she said, if anything broke, then it'll be the council's responsibility to dispose of those broken solar panels, and that'll be an additional cost. So in the end, after much thinking, she says, look, sorry, we can't accept. And you can take them to a landfill that accepts. And of course, her thought was that if that person doesn't find, they are going to end up in the environment somewhere. And that got us started because we really don't know where those 800 panels went and why they were taken off in the first place. And so as a researcher, I think this is the kind of thing that we would love to get our teeth in and try and find out. So we started working on this project, and I think I have a very old presentation, first version here, and that's all right. Don't worry about it. Sorry, I had a moment in the morning and I reversed the whole presentation, and saying, but I can keep going. So what we did was to have a plan to talk to all the stakeholders in this space. And we said, wanted to answer 3 questions. One is, why were those panels removed? It's a large number, 800 panels. Where were they taken? And what is the number of solar panels in the Northern Territory? And being an academic, I can tell you, I raise more questions than answers. So, you know, I might not have the answers, but I can tell you that these are questions that we need to start thinking about. So we interviewed about 21 people across the state, and this included the waste managers of local governments, recyclers. I'm missing my slide there, but that's all right. Oh yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's perfect. It's not going changing. One more? No. Should I go back and then forward? Yeah. So why were the panels removed? Perfect. So these were the stakeholders that we interviewed, even the system designers like the person who talked, Alexander, who talked earlier. And just to get an insight about this waste, we talked to people in all the various areas, so very remote, and Darwin, which we found out is just outer regional, even though they might want to call themselves a city. Unfortunately, they're not, to the happiness of Alice Spring people. And this is what we found out, the reasons for removing the panels. So I'll start with the first one on there. Of course, this is weather damage. So, you know, there's hail, rain, and they get broken, a few of them, and get taken off. In remote region, vandalism was a big one. And so stone throwing at solar panels, and they were broken and the system had to be changed. Technical failures is what we find mostly discussed in literature, that there's delamination, wiring failure, inverter failure, and this is most documented. And this was, of course, a reason. What became more and more interesting is that people, during renovations, if they have removed them, they don't want to put it back. They want to buy a new one and put that. And that led us to understand that it's being used almost as a commodity item, like your cell phone. If you can find a newer, better model, cheaper model, and you have to change an inverter in 10 to 12 years because, you know, the lifespan of panels and the inverters is not the same. What people are doing is that instead of just changing a few broken ones in either one of those situations, they want to replace the whole system. And so an average life of a solar panel is estimated to be 25 to 30 years, depending on which literature you look. But what the installers were telling us, that people were happy to change them after 10 to 12 years, which becomes quite problematic because it's half the working life of a panel. And one of the reasons was that the regulation, which is on the top, so if a panel was installed 10, 12 years back, and some of them have been broken, it's quite hard to replace just 3 or 4 of them. And I think it's a shortcut that people want to take. They advise the consumers, look, you just need to get a new one because you'll get new warranties. You're almost at the end of warranty. You'll get a larger system for less of the cost. And in that time, people have recovered the initial costs that they had put in when they first installed the panels. So all of these reasons are part of what is happening at the moment. Now, I'm not sure why that 800 panels came off. It could be just refurbishing, because even in new projects, when we look at schools that are getting funding for solar panels, we look at remote housing that's getting panels, what is happening to existing panels if they've been there? Some of them might not have, but this is something that we have to start looking at when we are installing panels, that if we are replacing them, where are they going? And if only 6 panels are damaged and we take off 50, where are the rest? And so this was a bit of a table, what we've figured out from the interviews, what is happening at the moment. There might be other things happening, but this is what we found. So of course, there are panels that are under warranty and the ones that are not. I don't want to go into too much detail, but if the panel is under warranty, sometimes the manufacturers want them back. Sometimes they say, look, just take it to the local landfill. We'll replace them with new ones, but they don't really pay for that disposal of panels. So they could go to landfill where they accept it. Again, with panels that are working, they were just removed because the other set needed to be taken off. Again, they have the option, they're still taken to landfill if landfill takes them. They can be stockpiled, and this is at the installer's level. There is no regulations and there's no organized market. They just give it or sometimes sell, because, but that's tricky because it doesn't have a warranty anymore. They will just give it to hobby farmers or caravans who need fewer panels for their use. And with the panels that are not under warranty, it is similar situations. The damaged panels, of course, you can't do anything except take out bits and pieces of it, and they have been reused as cables and so on, and again, stockpiled. So it was quite interesting because who's stockpiling? So it's just these contractors who have it in their backyard. And some of them take off the glass and aluminum from it and save it as a wafer, just the inside wafer, because it takes less space. But it's all extremely random. So if we further asked all the stakeholders we'd induced, what are the challenges that they faced? So of course, the economic and environmental cost. The big one was removing, transporting, and disposing in remote locations. Now, people who live in cities often do not know the costs involved of a contractor going out bush to change, let's say, 5 panels. So it will be the cost, the sitting cost of driving there might be $100 per hour. Cost per kilometer. So if it's 300 kilometers, you can add that. Once that person reaches there, it might just take him 4 hours or 5 hours to replace those panels. But by then, maybe it's evening, nighttime, so you have to give overnight allowances, add another $150 to $200. And we are not even talking about the disposal costs or the cost of the panels. And this can easily amount, this just the going and replacing can be in the scale of $4,000 to $5,000. And whereas a person doing it in the city would only be the cost of labor and stuff. So there are high costs involved in replacement. And who pays for that disposal? The contractors don't want to. They don't want to pass it on to their consumers because then their cost goes up. So it's a very, very tricky place where nobody wants to actually pay. So sometimes that's why it ends up in their backyard. And also council are not accepting. So if the council is not accepting, they don't know where to go. The interesting one was that everybody has the green image of renewables, which it is. So I don't at all at any one moment want to say that don't use renewables. And all the stakeholders said, look, if we don't put measures in place, that green image is going to get tarnished. So that is the approach that we need to take, that we do have to start working towards that. This was a big issue, not knowing what to do. So nobody really knows what to do, and it's nobody's fault, because I think at the national level also we are all trying to find out what to do. So they've come up with a product stewardship scheme where the solar manufacturers have to pay upfront for the end of life, which might work for the next set of panels that might come. But what about the legacy waste of solar, which hasn't been a legacy waste till now? And there's a lot of uncertainty about the next step. So if a remote council we were talking to, they said, we're happy to collect the panels, but then what? So nobody really knows where to take them. Do we take them? Where are the recycling facilities? How expensive is it going to be? Is the transport going to be causing more emissions than what it is worth? And again, they don't have any directions as how do we store them. If we start collecting them, where do we store? What are the details? Is it an e-waste or it's not an e-waste? Diverting from landfill is something that they're all looking at. Like Victorian landfills have stopped accepting and they classify them as e-waste. So it's regulated. So there's no option. You just can't accept it. So the people are then forced to go to recyclers. But again, there's that cost issue because recyclers just don't take them for free. They charge you $20 to $30 or whatever that particular person's cost is for accepting a solar panel. So is the option to take it to the landfill and pay by ton? Or is it a better option to send it to a recycler? So this is something what Dean was also discussing. You know, the cost issue is a bit of an issue. And again, when we make the policy for renewable, let's say for Northern Territory, we say we should have 50% energy from renewables by 2050. They don't add it to the waste policy. At the same time, when you're installing these panels, that's the time to understand where will they go in 30 years. And now we are seeing they're getting there in 12 years. So we really don't have the time to actually think that, oh, it's very far away. It's actually knocking at our doorstep because the ones that were installed 15 years back will all be coming to landfill quite soon. So just some of the key findings from the first beat is that there is more than tech failure and don't know what to do, what next. And the complete recycling of PV panels is not occurring in Australia. Whatever we might think, we sometimes have this habit to use anything, whatever it might be, and say, let's leave it for recycling. It's very hard to recycle everything, especially in this region with distances, unless we have a solution which is a local small-scale solution. So we shouldn't be just leaving it up for recycling. And in Australia, there might be claims that we do full recycling. That's not true yet. They are all stockpiling to build up volumes before full recycling occurs. And of course, the gap. Now, again, the second bit is that if we do go for recycling, how many panels are there? And that was a very hard one to get to, because we do have the clean energy regulators, which actually record when you put up and give you a rebate. They have some idea of how many panels there are, but only for people who have applied for that rebate. If you haven't, then your record's not going to be there. And their record is more on postcodes, and waste management is done through the local government area. So there is a mismatch there. And of course, there's no data on decommissioned. So we might be installing X amount of panels, but how many have come off, we don't know. And so this, from that approximate databases, we did some calculations. I'm not going too much into this. We have got a 100-page report. So I'm really just touching very briefly. If anybody's interested, you can just look at the details there. So that's the kind of about 396,000 solar PV panels since 1996. Clean energy regulators only have records from 2000, 2001 onwards. And it is estimated to have that sharp waste trajectories because they will be coming to their end of life at that time. Again, when we talk about recycling, we cannot not talk about the materials, the constituent materials. So what we again fail to acknowledge is the different types. Over years, the technology is changing. The early panels might have a certain composition of glass, aluminum, silicon, and other polymers, but with changing the material, materials are decreasing to make it more cost efficient. Silver was a big one that people thought that when we recycle, we'll get a lot of silver. But with, again, after 2010, the manufacturers are reducing the amount of silver in it. So what we have here is up to 2050, but it's also to note that all these materials are not just sitting, they're dispersed in all the LGAs. So if we might say that there are 400,000 panels, how do you collect that 400,000 panels? What about the transport cost? So it's not directly transferable that this is the amount of tons and that we can recover as straightforward as it appears to be. And the process of recovering can be quite tedious. So in terms of economies of scale, it doesn't seem very viable. Now, of course, if the sun cable comes in, it might just change the whole dynamics of waste and generate a fair bit and make recycling an attractive proposition. And even then, it seems to be not before that time. So the key thing, so that there's three overall suggestions that we had, is that at the moment we do need to look seriously at stockpiling. Now this could be a decentralized option, but it has to be identified and regulated. So it can't just be, just leave it and they will be somewhere in space. So we have to identify, okay, fine, if not in the remote community, can we have backfilling and get those to certain points where they are collected in a safe way. They are kept and stored till further technology develops to recycle. Again, policy and regulatory reform about the same, with matching the different policies, housing policies, when you're putting up solar panels, asset management. Again, if it is not residential and it's an asset for an organization, how do you work in those situations? It's not the same as a consumer looking after theirs. And so their concerns are different and they have to form policies for that. and explore other options than recycling. What about reuse? Can we use the 50 panels out of the 60 that were there, only 10 were broken? What about those 50? Can we have online things? This has been explored in the US and Europe, where they have an online market. And so you can trade your panels, and in those ways, you sometimes even find the older models that you are looking for, and you can replace them. So not putting all your eggs in one basket and saying we leave it all for recycling. How about we find other ways of doing it, making sure that we don't generate that waste in the first place? Can we extend the life of the panel that is there by ongoing maintenance and other things? And of course, a lot of people say make consumers aware, but that's a very hard one, asking a person not to take off the panel because it's like your mobile phone. Why wouldn't you want to take it if the newer model takes better pictures? So it's just a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And like I said, I don't really know where those 800 panels went, but what we wanted to do was to just raise this issue that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And we do have to take into account that these panels do have a cost, and it's much better we start looking at them early than later. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, friends? Yes, at the back. I'm gonna handle that one. That's too far away.
Thanks, Deepika. That was enlightening. Question during your presentation, you referred to removal, and you said that material is taken to a landfill or then to a recycler. They're the two options. But then you said that there's no recycling. So what did you find there? The recyclers that are reclaiming recycling are purely stockpiling the glass and the aluminium, because under the new federal export bans, those glass panels will not be allowed to be recycled because that will be captured under the glass. But everyone thinks the export bans are purely about the yellow top. It's not. It's about the material itself. So currently the solar panels, I do know a lot of them get sold offshore. Did you find evidence of the whole panels going into Bangladesh, India, and those third developing countries? Or was it just being stockpiled?
No, we talked to two recyclers. Of course, they were both not in the Northern Territory. One of them said that they have processes where they separate the glass and the aluminium, and the wafer is shipped overseas. They were reluctant to tell us which country it goes to. And then all the materials that get extracted of value and not of value, hazardous, happens elsewhere. And they're recovered in those countries. So when we say that there is so much material recovery in recycling, and this is the cost and these are the benefits, they're not directly coming here. The glass, aluminium you are, but the others you're sending away. And the other recycler had again, the same system of recovering the glass and aluminium, but they are stockpiling. They say currently we do not have the volumes in Australia to get a machine, or they're in the process of getting machinery that will recycle that wafer and break it down into its individual components. So both the options are there. The other ones, I guess, are understanding that they can't send it overseas, but till now it was being sent overseas. So when people are saying, look, bring it to us, which is fine. We do need to take it to a somewhere responsible space. But the distances from here to New South Wales, South Australia, Western Australia, if we start looking at the life cycle of these panels, I think we do need to understand that there was some cost of constructing them. So the materials that were extracted somewhere in the world, these things were manufactured and we used them, and it's only the use period that we are celebrating, as we should, but we cannot just negate the impacts that it has, and we shouldn't be starting to find them in when we go for walks in the bush. Yeah.
Any further questions?
It's lunch. I just had a film that we had made, because my earlier work was more on construction waste, and we had made a film in discussion with some of the remote councils for the contractors who work there in the construction, and we had made a short film for DENR and the people here. And I'm not going to play it now, but during lunch or at some point, we'll just play it. It's only 7 minutes. And it's just about construction waste recycling, which happens to be one of the big components of waste, and just urging the contractors and letting them know what the right thing is. And that's it. So just before you come back from lunch, perhaps we'll have it there. And look, I can send it to everybody. There's no real reason for you to sit here and watch it.
Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for Deepika, everybody? All right. Thank you very much to the presenters that we've had at the first half of today. It is now time for our lunch break. We have an hour for lunch, and we don't have to go for a walk today. Lunch is being served at Cozzie's Poolside Bar and Bistro, which is just over this side. So we're back in here at 1 o'clock for that first presentation. And if you get here before 1 o'clock, we'll screen that video in the lead up to that 1 o'clock start time. So feel free to come back in a little bit earlier than that. But otherwise, if you want to make your way over there and enjoy another wonderful lunch. Thanks, everybody.